Thank you for joining us, and remember to like and subscribe as you're watching. This is Rollin with my homies. I am your host, Santina. Very, very excited to have my homie here today. This is Lara Ameen. She's a writer, she's a PhD student, and she's a busy, busy lady. Yeah. How are you, Lara? I'm so glad to finally have you on the show.
I know. I feel like it's been we've been trying to arrange this forever.
Yes,
it's been forever.
Yes, I appreciate the fact that you're also a watcher of the show, so that makes
yes, of course.
Thank you. Yeah. So what's going on? What's new?
Professionally, I've just been applying to a lot of, because I write TV drama stuff, so I've been applying with my scripts to a lot of contests and fellowships and getting a lot of rejections. And I write short stories and getting rejections. I wrote a novella that I'm trying to get published with a small press, but I have a short story coming out. I think they just told me in September. This September. So it's been a while, but it'll eventually come out. And I'm also working on my dissertation proposal. I study disability representation in the media. And my actual dissertation will be about a TV drama pilot that I'm adapting into a novella. And then I'm going to have a staged reading with actors, which is I want you to be in my dissertation, because I think it's so important to have disabled actors portray disabled characters. That's my whole beef is if you're not hiring, disabled writers, producers, actors, crew, in your production, what are you doing? And as you know, it always gets left out of conversations about diversity. How many times have we been in a room and they're talking about diversity and inclusion and disability doesn't come up once? So I'm hoping that through writing this, it does help. It does initiate some change, but we all know that change is very slow when it comes to disability representation. It's kind of glacial. So
yeah.
Just trying.
Yeah, well, that's right. So that's a great intro because you are writing all kinds of things. You're so talented. In fact, we met on the panel of a BinderCon, which people don't know. It's like a convention for writers and right. I mean,
for essayists, novelists, screenwriters, and I remember I sat right next to you.
Yeah.
And we were in this panel, and I sat right next to you, and I was like, "She's so cool! I love what she's doing!" And blah blah blah. And then we kind of lost touch, and I got rid of Facebook because I think we followed each other on there at one point, and then we saw each other at another event, and I was like, "Oh, we need to reconnect again." And so
and then we've kept in touch mostly over Instagram, basically.
Yeah.
Social media has its pluses and minuses. We'll just say that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. So but I was sitting right next to you, and I thought the same thing. I thought, wow, this girl is really doing a lot. So I was really happy to see that because it's important that we have people on all sides of the camera, or of the screen when we talk about disability in media. Sure, I'm an actor, but I'm also a writer, and I think that it's there's a lot of discussion about people with disabilities getting the roles that we should be getting, and yada yada, and that's all so true. But we have to talk about what's going on behind the camera as well, and in the writers' rooms, right? Before we even
writers' rooms and directors and producers and who's sound people and gaffer, everybody behind the scenes, and they're not, I don't think, recognized. And especially when disability comes up, people don't think that disabled people are capable when we just need to adapt and who's better at adapting than disabled people? I mean, come on.
It's funny you say that. I read an article when I was younger that said, people don't want to hire people with disabilities because they're worried about XYZ, but what they don't realize is that people with disabilities are problem solvers by nature, and that's what we should be hiring, for all sorts of different positions because, right, we're the ones. I mean, I had to do it today. I had to get something out of the high cabinet. I couldn't reach it. So what did I do? I pulled out the what do you call it? The ladle or whatever. And I figured it out. Did I get hit in the head with a piece of Tupperware? A little bit. That's all right. I'm resilient. We're resilient, but we're problem solvers, Where else was I going to put the fruit salad? I had to put it somewhere.
Yeah.
So, so I think that's really, really, really important. And I know that something that you've talked about before is how, because there is sort of I think there is no one path in the entertainment industry, especially, but in, any sort of profession, but especially in the entertainment industry. But there is sort of a hierarchy and there is sort of a ladder that you have to climb.
Absolutely.
Right. And so you were telling me earlier, which I loved, but before we jumped on here, that there's an issue with that, with just the ladder climbing.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
The ladder climbing up, because so in order to get a job, if you want to write for television specifically, and you want to get a job in a writer's room, there are typically 3 ways to do it. You can get an agent or a manager and hope your script places high enough in a contest that gets you an agent or a manager that can staff you on a show. There's the fellowship route where you win one of the TV network big fellowships like Disney or CBS or WB, and you hope they staff you afterwards, and you hope that leads to more staffing opportunities. Or there's the assistant route, which many of my friends do, and they work for 10, 15 years to do it, where you're a production assistant or showrunner's assistant or writer's assistant, and they're all kind of different jobs but similar, but you're working either with writers in the room or with other parts of the production to make it go smoothly. And a lot of disabled people are shut out from those opportunities because we're not physically able to do them. So automatically the assistant route gets shut out from us because we can't physically do them. So that leaves us with the fellowship route, but what you have to realize is the people applying to the fellowships are also the writer's assistants, showrunners assistants, and the people already working in the industry. And people who have industry experience already are more likely to get those jobs or those fellowships because they're working in the industry and they have the experience. But it's how do you expect an emerging writer with a disability to get that experience if they can't do an assistant job or they can't get a fellowship? Where does it leave? I have a portfolio. I have 2 drama pilots ready to go and a short film script that I'd love to get made into a film someday. And my scripts have queer disabled characters because that's how I identify. And it's kind of like a numbers game, as with auditioning, that you submit and you get rejected. But if you only have 1 or 2 paths in, you don't have the other paths open, and it becomes a problem. And that's where it kind of gets messier, and you have to no matter how much you network, it's not enough because you're just stuck in with everybody else, but you want to stand out, and it becomes difficult when you don't have the same tools, but it's not your fault,
Right. Yeah. Because, something that I wasn't aware of before I got here, when I heard writer's assistant, I thought, oh, okay, cool. So you're in the room with the writers and you take some notes or you pitch some jokes but no, I have friends who are writer's assistants and they're, picking up laundry and they're
I can't drive. I mean, even when I lived in LA, I tried to get an internship. I interviewed with I won't say the name of the company, but I interviewed twice with a major company to get an internship during my MFA in screenwriting when I was living in LA. And I interviewed with them, and as soon as I said I couldn't drive, they were like, okay, bye, and they hung up.
So you couldn't even get a job that they weren't going to pay you for.
Yeah, exactly. I think they are paying me internships now, but some of them still don't pay. So I was I can't even get like at least like if you're a student and you can get a basic job, like that's a starting point, that's something. But I can't even get that, and that's like below writers, you know.
Right, because everybody's level of ability or capability is different. Because I had an internship at Comedy Central when I was in college, and but it was the internship itself, once I was in the building, was great, but trying to get to Manhattan every day on the train, up through on the bus, but I mean, it was a nightmare just trying to get there every day. And when it came time to write the essay at the end of the class, like, what did you learn? I was like, I learned that public transportation is a nightmare for people with disabilities. It's like, yeah. I learned about comedy stuff. Great. But you know what I really learned? And it was like, well, that wasn't really the assignment. And I'm like, well, that's not really my problem. We have to, this can't be. This cannot
that is the problem.
It is. And I moved across the country because it was easier for me to get around in Los Angeles than it was for me to try to get around in New York. Like, that's a problem, So I hear you. And
that's ridiculous.
Yes, it is ridiculous. But the thing is, like I said, once I was in the building, I was able to contribute to ideas and things that that maybe somebody else wouldn't have. So because I had the ability at the time, which I don't have that energy now, I don't think, but at the time I had the ability and the energy to just get there and do it. But it's not fair, because look what they would have been missing out on, if I didn't get there. And that's what you're saying. It's like, because you don't drive or whatever, I have friends in LA and in New York who don't drive, able-bodied friends. So what? It's not right.
No, it's not. It's not okay at all.
While we're talking about this, can you tell me your disability origin story? Because I would like to know.
Okay, I have cerebral palsy. I was diagnosed when I was 2. I was born early. I was born on Christmas. I was supposed to be born in March, but I was born on Christmas. In the mid 80s.
Is that like being born on Christmas, or do you hate it, or do you?
Oh, I'm Jewish, so it's it's great, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
It's perfect. So whenever Hanukkah falls around Christmas, it's like, well, but I don't totally hate it, because I still get presents and stuff, but like as you get older, you kind of get less stuff. Yeah. But it's okay. But like, what I'm gonna do? It's my birthday. I want to celebrate it, So I was born, 3 months early on Christmas. I wasn't diagnosed with cerebral palsy till I was 2. I was diagnosed with scoliosis when I was 3, because my spine, it's like a curvature of the spine. And it just kind of gets progressively worse because it has a mind of its own. I also have an invisible sensory disability called hyperacusis, which means I startle with loud noises or anything loud, or the vacuum cleaner, or you can't pop balloons around me, like I'll freak out. Like that's why I can't drive. I was like, no, like I can CP, like I'd be fine. Like I would use hand controls and I'd be fine. But like if I were to drive a car and someone honks, I'd jump and I'd lose control of the car.
That's so interesting, because who would know that? People would assume you can't drive because of the CP.
Right, exactly.
Which is, and I have to be honest, for some reason, that's what I was assuming. But I have friends with CP who do drive. So why, if even I was just assuming that, a lot of other people were, especially.
Yeah, and that's why I like to bring it up, because I'm like, I have this disability that you can't see. It does affect me. When I was younger and in like elementary school and we'd have fire drills, I'd have to leave early because I couldn't handle the noise. Even my apartment at school right now, where I'm getting my PhD, if they have fire drills in their building, because it's a school, and I email them and I tell them, please tell me. Obviously I'm not going to know when an actual fire, God forbid that happens, like the alarm has to go off. But if they're doing a drill, I'm like, please tell me ahead of time, because I need to book it out of there. I can't stand the noise. I will have a panic attack. I will cry. I will have a breakdown. Like, it's very painful. The noise feels like it's like suffocating you. And kind of, and I think that, and I know people with who are disabled or have CP or other disabilities who drive, and they're like, well, can't you just get hand controls? And I'm like, no, 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 you don't understand, it's something else. And then so I have to explain, oh, I have this disability you can't see. And then people are like, oh, okay. So like even the novel I'm writing right now, my character has it, like my main character has it, because
Right.
I want to like bring awareness to the fact that this isn't talked about. And
Yeah, that's why I like doing this show, because I've been in the disability community since I was 6 years old, and this is news to me. I haven't heard of this one myself, so I'm.
yeah, and then not a lot of people have. It's basically collapsed tolerance to sound. When I was like little and my mom would run the vacuum cleaner, I would cry. Fireworks are hell. So I put on the headphones and earplugs, and it feels like hell.
No wonder you feel such a kinship to Luciano. He also, my dog,
Yeah.
he hates fireworks too. So maybe you guys.
I feel for all your animals out there who hate fireworks. Like, I feel you, puppy. Give me a hug.
What about sirens, like ambulance or police cars?
Siren, yeah. If cars like back up, like when they back, or like motorcycle
Really?
noises, that yeah.
So now I know you live in an Orange County right now,
Orange
right?
County, yeah.
Which is, for people who don't know, which is a county out just next to Los Angeles, but you want to move here into
I want to move to LA when I finish my PhD. I don't know when that's going to be, because even when I finish my PhD, I know there will be a process in finding an accessible apartment to live in LA.
I know. Well, that's one thing, and good luck with that. I'm dealing with that myself. But I'll give you tips when you're ready.
Yeah, I was gonna be like, I'll contact you when I'm ready.
Yeah, but what I can't promise you, because another thing I'm dealing with right now in my apartment is the noise on my street, the garbage trucks that back up, and and how are you preparing for that? I mean, do you use ambient noise? Like, how do you?
That's a good idea. When my parents are doing stuff, my dad works out of the house, so I close the door. I'll just usually put in earplugs or headphones.
Uh-huh.
I sometimes sleep with them, which is not the most comfortable, but I don't have a choice. My apartment's okay, the one that I've had. It does get noisy sometimes, but it's been, so. I don't know how LA is gonna be. I've lived there before, but it was in Northridge, and it was in the student housing. So things like the winds would really wake me up and stuff like that. Like, because they get windy and.
Yeah. Well, I don't even have this. I'm sorry. Can you remind me what it's called?
It's called hyperacusis. I know.
Hyperacusis. I don't have hyperacusis, and I have to have ambient noise because it feels like psychological warfare outside of my window sometimes. Hey, you know what I want to tell you about? I got this. It's headphones, but it's inside like a headband. I use it on an airplane so that I can have my head flat. You should get that because it's good for sleeping.
That sounds really interesting.
It's really cool. I could send you the link on Amazon, and then you can just plug it into your phone and have ambient noise going, and maybe that will help.
That sounds awesome, actually.
Yeah, I love finding things that what I call are accessible by accident. Like my hot water, I drink tea all day, and my hot water cooler I call accessible by accident because it's just so much easier than having to heat up water, on the stove or whatever.
Isn't it amazing how many things that we find that like work for us that people are like, oh, I didn't know that, but like it already works for us, that like we don't consider it because it's just part of our daily lives, so we don't consider it. Like we might not consider it like an accommodation or an accessibility thing, but people are like, oh, I didn't know this, works, but we've been using, certain tools or certain things for a long time. I mean, even if you want to get into the plastic straw debate, plastic straws, which I use all the time so I don't jump when I drink my stuff, they were used in hospitals for, ever before. All the stuff with the turtle and the environment, people were coming at disabled people for that. Like, people don't realize that some of the stuff that we use as tools, they were designed for us, but then it's like, oh, able people get to use it. or like
I'm seeing that big time right now with closed captioning. It's like nobody cared, but now that influencers need it for, so people can watch their TikTok videos while they're in class. Now all of a sudden closed captioning is everywhere. And great, I'm glad it is, but it's just another example of when enough people, able-bodied people need it, that's when things get done. Which, that brings me to the whole COVID conversation, because I know we both were like, what the hell, this whole past year.
We were both posting. I remember, like, you were posting and I was posting. Like, I just remember being shut out of opportunities just because I couldn't drive or I couldn't get there, or the requirements in the job would say must have a driver's license or must be able to lift 30 pounds. And that's how they cut people from job. Like, the ableist is baked into the job requirement. The ableism is baked into the job requirement to discourage disabled people from applying. That's what I think, even though sometimes I apply anyway. But I mean, why else would they put it in? I don't know.
Well, I don't know what lifting something that's 30 pounds has to do with a writer's room.
Unless I don't know either. I would like an answer to that.
Well, but that's the writer's rooms. I know you had said that earlier that sometimes they're inaccessible, and I've experienced that myself. But as we saw this past year, you don't need to physically go into a writer's room to create a show. Zoom is a great, or whatever you want to use.
You created a whole film on. You directed a whole. I thought that was wonderful. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's directing. Like, that's wonderful. Like, but you might not have done that if you were doing it in person. Maybe you would have thought, oh, I don't want to do that. Or, because you were on Zoom, maybe it gave you another opportunity. Like,
yeah, maybe. There's a lot of things that I've done this year. There was an acting class that I really wanted to take before COVID that I was accepted. You had to apply, and I was accepted based on my my resume, and I was so excited. And then just before I paid, I said, oh, I just want to make sure it's accessible. No, it's upstairs, no elevator. So I was great. Now I'm not going to get to take this class with this casting director and further my connections and my education. And guess who took the class throughout quarantine, because all of a sudden it was available to me.
And it's such a basic, accessibility is such a basic, like, it's not any big deal. I remember I was on a panel with Scott Silveri, who was the showrunner of Speechless. Mm-hmm. And he talked about, I don't know if it was the panel that I was on him with, or I saw him on a different panel. And he talked about how when I'm forgetting his name, who played JJ, was Micah. When Micah came and he, they had to make his accommodations. It wasn't a big deal. It didn't cost anything extra. They just made it work. And even with my friend's show, who had a character who used a wheelchair, when I asked her, how did they make that? They're just like, yeah, they just had a wheelchair accessible trailer for her, because she used her wheelchair, she used a power chair. And it's not that big. People make it a big deal. It's not. It's really not.
No, it's just a few extra, not even many. And the thing is, actors, celebrities, they have riders, right? I don't know if people know about these things where they write in, and, even my agent sometimes when I book something will say, do you need anything other than accessibility? Is there anything you want me to request? And then people, the higher up people are, they'll say things like, yes, please make sure the water is Evian, or please make sure that the famous one is like, please make sure the Skittles are the M&Ms are all red, whatever it is, right? And we are asking for, like you said, basic stuff. And the making something accessible can only help everyone, right?
Everybody, exactly.
Yes. Mothers with strollers benefit from accessibility. Movers benefit from accessibility. I mean, everybody just, it's not
And when you're working online, think about people. When I had a job with the Academy, working for the Academy, Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. I was doing research for them, not for my PhD, but like as a separate job throughout the beginning of the pandemic. And I said to them, I said, like, they had people from other states, not just in LA or California, but from other states, working from other countries, who would Zoom in. And I'm like, you need to keep this model available going forward, whether we have a pandemic or not, because you're missing out on people who are maybe low income, who are single parents, who have other types of things besides disabilities, who live in other cities or states or whatever, who might not have access to that job otherwise. Like, I know internet connection is an issue for some people, and I acknowledge that that is an issue. Sorry, my dog. But like, you're opening up the playing field for not just disabled people, but for other people who might be in other types of situations. No. And the pandemic has showed us that. So
yes, not every funny, creative person lives in Los Angeles, California. You know,
exactly.
Come on.
Yeah, we come from all over to work in LA, New York, Chicago, you know, whatever. Like, I moved out of LA to do my PhD, but like, you know, I want to go back, but like, I also want to travel. But then you talk about, you know, you see all the horror stories about the wheelchairs breaking, and I'm like, should I travel? You know,
travel is a nightmare. And now they're sending people to space, and I'm like, oh really? We're sending people to space? Can we fix what's going on here first?
Exactly.
People with disabilities. I mean, come on.
Let people with disabilities, let wheelchair users sit in our chairs on a flight. Then it won't break.
I know, it's literally sitting. The whole plane is sitting. Why can't it makes no sense. It makes no sense. It's a huge problem. It's a huge problem. And I think things are getting better. Do you agree?
I mean, it's been a while since I've traveled, but the airlines have broken one of my wheels. I had a wheelchair that I used for travel, and they did break it at one point. They broke my walker at one point. I walk a little bit with my cerebral palsy, and they broke the wheel of my walker and it was wrapped up. It was in a plastic bag, and we took it apart, and it was broken. So yes, that was a few years ago, but it's still going to happen, you know.
Well, let me be clear. I didn't mean things are getting better with airplane travel. I meant just in general, things are getting better.
Oh yeah,
but like you said, at a glacial pace. But airplane travel seems to be behind, which is crazy to me, because you know, it's a I don't know, billion or million, I don't know, but it's a huge industry, right? It's a huge industry.
Don't you want people to travel? Like,
right. You know, we have an audience question, so I really want to take
it. Yeah.
It's interesting. It says, do you think accessibility needs to be advocated by able-bodied people for people to take it seriously? What do you think?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, they need to be allies to us and say, hey, this is a problem. Like, if Santina and I are traveling together, but we have, you know, friends who are not disabled traveling with us, and something happens to one of our chairs or something, you know, I do think, yes, we are advocating for ourselves, but I do think it's important for non-disabled people to be aware of that, because like, our friends are going to be aware of that, but other people aren't. And like, you're basically saying, if your wheelchair or mobility device breaks because of an airline or, you know, something, you're basically telling that disabled person, you know, that they can't use parts of their body to move around.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, it goes. I say the same thing about accessibility in restaurants, things like that. If I went up to a manager and said, you know, you really should have a ramp, they're most likely going to say, oh yeah, sorry. And
right, they're not going to, you know, if enough people come in who are both disabled and not disabled, I think, and enough people say something,
yes,
maybe something will change.
Yes, if enough able-bodied people start saying it, right, then I think they start going, wait, we have a problem here. Everybody's really upset about this inaccessibility. And because money talks, right? And so that's why people boycott companies and things like that. But it's not just enough and it applies to just, I think a lot of different minorities. It's like if you advocate for your own thing, it can come across as complaining, which it's not, but that's what it can come across as. But if everybody gets behind you and backs it up and it becomes a movement of sorts, that's when change is made.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Like with, protesting and with other things, like if enough people speak out about it, then change can start to happen, and it's slow, but it'll start. If not enough people speak out about it, especially with accessibility, because that actually affects everyone. It affects people who are not disabled too, because eventually they could become disabled. And I'm not saying that to scare people. I'm saying that because it's true. Like,
well, the truth is, it wouldn't be so scary if the world was caught up. Because if you have the fact that I have a disability isn't really what holds me back. It's the fact that the world around me is not equipped for someone with a disability that holds me back.
Which is basically the social model of disability. For those who aren't familiar with disability studies, social model of disability is basically there are barriers in the environment that are disabling, but disabled people are not it's not because of disabled people that makes them like disabled, but it's the environment around them that is more disabling than their disabilities.
Yeah, take for example glasses, right? You wear glasses, I wear glasses.
Yeah.
Right now, but okay, so when you're wearing your glasses, that's an assistive device because you can't see. You don't think, wow, this sucks that I can't see and I'm wearing glasses. No, you can see because your glasses are on. Let's say you went somewhere and they went, oh, I'm sorry, ma'am, you're not allowed to enter here with your glasses on. Then you would be like, but now I can't see. Now this is messing me up. Now I don't know what to do.
Yeah, like right? People with their service dogs. How the service dog, because I want to get a service dog someday, and I love dogs like you, and it's just like being that. I hear the stories of people who are blind or in wheelchairs or whatever will be denied, and it's like, this is my service animal, they're allowed to be here, and it's the same type of thing. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think a lot of the service animal thing, just like a lot of things, has sort of been co-opted by people who are non-disabled, and now we're sort of dealing with this thing where people, I was stopped the other day and they're like, well, is that a service animal? And I'm like, I'm in a wheelchair. And to be honest, it's not. He's not. But I couldn't leave him. It was mid-pandemic, sort of like he couldn't be left alone.
I
didn't want to leave him. So I also was taking advantage of the situation. But I can take advantage. But I was just thinking like this, she was so aggressive, the employee, and I'm like, what? I'm in a wheelchair. What more do I have to do to prove to this woman that I have a disability,
That's not, you want me to get up, and then it's like, you see all the people like, oh, people get up out of their wheelchairs, oh, you must be fine. Like, no.
Okay. Yeah, we have we're getting there. I think that, people like you are helping to move things along through your creativity and also your education, and I'm so glad. Let me ask you a question, sort of like a dumb question, but when you write a dissertation, right, who is the audience for that? Who reads that?
Oh, that's a good question. So most dissertations for PhDs, from what I understand, and I'm not a super expert, they're going to be academic and they're going to be for an academic audience. So when my dissertation would get posted online when I'm done, like, people can find it online and read it or whatever. Because mine is creative and mine is different, I do want to expand it. That's why I want to have a staged reading and have the script and stuff, because I want it to be accessible to not just disabled people and not just scholars, but the general public in general. My advisor is excellent, but I've also experienced a lot of ableism in my program. I get nasty, I'll be upfront about this because they're not on my Instagram, so it doesn't matter. I've gotten nasty comments from people on social media, people that I know, not like random strangers, like people that I've known. Like, one was a classmate who said, like, how dare you do a PhD and do a creative dissertation, and it's not enough rigor, and you're blah blah blah, and like I got like, you don't need a PhD to be in a writer's room, and I'm like, I know that already. What are you? That's not why I'm doing it. But I would get really nasty comments from people. So eventually, because I wanted to stop responding, I just blocked them. But it's really disheartening when people come at me, and I've had this several times, just to say like, oh, you shouldn't be, the creative dissertation is basically BS. When it's another form of making it more accessible to, not to just to an academic audience, but to the general public. And I think that that's, can be a very good thing. I don't know why someone would, say like, oh, you shouldn't blah blah blah. Like you said earlier, you said something earlier. You said everyone's path into the industry is different, which is very true. And there is no one way. Some people have no college education or grad school education and work their way in. Some people have a lot of education and work their way in. There's all these different ways to make it. There's no just one way. So to harass someone, it was harassment, to harass someone for doing a creative PhD. I don't understand. It's still, I don't know.
I don't know why they're not just concerned with their own thing.
Like, why do you have to come in and just say that? Like,
I mean, look at Ken Jeong. I think that's his name, right? Dr. Ken. He was a doctor. He was an actual
doctor. Yeah. A lot of the people who are in writers' rooms now, from what I've seen, like who've transitioned from other careers, have been lawyers, have been doctors, like in medicine, not PhDs, but like MDs, have transitioned from lawyer careers, doctor careers. Like,
why not?
As long as you're bringing a different perspective to the room, like you did with your internship, you're bringing another perspective to the room, to the audition, whatever. I don't see how that can be a bad thing. Like, how is that a bad thing?
I don't know. Well, I agree with you there. But you know what? Let's talk about something we disagree on, because I think this is funny. You think that it's easier to work with comedy when it comes to disability, correct?
I don't know if it's easier, but I see more of it. That's kind of what I meant. Like, I see a lot more of it.
You think that there's more comedy with disability?
There's way more.
I think that's so interesting that you say that, because I personally feel completely the opposite. I think that all anybody wants to talk about when it comes to disability, unless they're making like a crude, low-hanging fruit joke, is and trauma and my left foot and $1 Million Baby. I Am Sam and give them the Oscar and wow. So tell me why you think this, because it's very interesting.
I guess, I helped one of my disabled friends. So one of my jobs, I don't know if she would watch this, but one of my jobs during my PhD has been helping one of my disabled friends. She was doing her own PhD, and she did her dissertation, a very traditional dissertation, but she did her dissertation on disabled comedians. And she interviewed a bunch of disabled comedians, like maybe 10, to say like how disability and humor, it was all about like disability and humor and all that. And I noticed, not just with her dissertation, but when I look at programming, like, because I want to write for TV, not film, so I guess I'm not really looking at film as much. I noticed that all the shows, the only 2 shows that I could think of that have disabled actors played by disabled characters played by disabled actors in dramas, like sci-fi fantasy dramas, I'm like getting very specific because that's what I write, is Jericho with Shoshana Stern and Raising Dion with Sammy Haney, who is a little girl. But I can't really think of like other, especially with sci-fi and fantasy. Like, I understand that with drama, you're going to get the boohoo story. And I think that's totally unnecessary and too romanticized. And then you get to talk about Me Before You and $1 Million Baby. And I think it's all BS. I don't know if I could curse here, but BS. But I think that from what I've seen when I like wrote my dissertation proposal, most of my examples that I was saying, hey, here's an example of, disability-centered media where they've cast disabled actors, where sometimes it's created by a disabled person. It's mostly been in comedy. I know there's This Close, which I think is a drama, but there's like not, especially for sci-fi, fantasy, and supernatural stuff, there's not, and you get a lot of like, I get a lot of this when I write disabled characters in sci-fi fantasy. I get like, I was in a screenwriting class and then I dropped it because I hated the professor. And he says to me, I wanted to adapt my short story into a pilot. And he literally says to me, so when your main character, she's disabled, she goes into this other dimension, she gets cured, right? And I'm like, what? I was just like,
Right.
what are you talking about? Like, it made me so uncomfortable that he wanted to automatically think to cure the disabled character because she went into another dimension to save somebody. And that's what when people think about sci-fi and fantasy narratives, they don't think about how, if you're looking at sci-fi, which I write more fantasy than sci-fi, but if you're looking at sci-fi and technology, you want to look at how technology can maybe enhance disability but not cure it. And I think there's a fine line there. And with fantasy, you don't want a magical cure, but to have a disabled character with special powers, like, how cool is that? Like, yeah, that's what gets me going,
Yeah, but I think you're right. I guess people think, well, if this person is magical or this person is a genius, tech billionaire, why wouldn't they just fix their problem when it's
but because disability in the narrative, disability is portrayed as the problem,
right, which maybe they would rather go back in time because they miss their grandparent. Maybe that's their biggest problem.
Like, I've written a lot of time travel, so it's interesting. And I've also been cognizant of, I'm not a paraplegic like you, but I had written a paraplegic like side character, and I was very cognizant of like, how do I portray that? I was writing it for a novella, and I was like, how do I portray this character? I wanted to portray more her life after, becoming disabled versus like before, and I didn't want it to be like this, that she didn't want a cure, but that she had to adapt to her life, and I wanted it to be more that what she had to deal with after, but like it was just part of her life. Like, it wasn't, she's a wheelchair user, but it wasn't like I wasn't looking to cure her, or I wasn't looking at her story before she became disabled that much. Like, I mentioned it, but that wasn't the focus of it. The focus was, she is the side character, her girlfriend was the lead character, and they're going on a thing together, and they're just disabled and they're fine. Like, it's,
if I had seen something like that growing up, it would have been so valuable to me, just based on the fact that every time I did see someone with a disability, they were portrayed as, it was never just like the fun friend or whatever,
or helpless, or
and that's just such an important thing that we need. Even as an adult, I'd like to see it, but as a kid,
my God,
it would have
been, because I remember like,
well, not only would it have been invaluable to me, but for my peers who slowly but surely went from being like, oh, cool, that's a wheelchair, oh, fun, I don't have one, okay, let's go play, to like, wait a minute, I'm learning that that's bad and that's weird. And then I went from like being just, cool like everybody else to being so different. And it's that middle school, high school age where people start learning what's right and what's wrong and what's
difference.
I mean, earlier you mentioned you identify as queer as well. So how do you feel, like, how did that fold into your whole journey?
So I'll back up a little bit. And I think part of this story because you heard it at BinderCon, but my introduction to television was The Secret World of Alex Mack, which was a 90s TV show on Nickelodeon. I got to meet the cast, and that was my not Make-A-Wish, but it was the Starlight Foundation, that was my wish to. And the showrunner decided to put me behind the camera during, they were filming the series finale, and he's like, "Oh, we have a surprise for you." And I have a picture on my Instagram of me behind a huge camera in the 90s filming. Like, that was my first experience, like entertainment industry experience. And when you were talking about before, like seeing someone when you're young, I didn't have that representation, but I remember wanting to be Alex Mack and wanting to have powers and have that, representation. And I didn't know back then that I was identified as queer. Didn't come out till later, but I just remember wanting to see that representation, and that kind of carried on into the other things that I would in the other shows and things that I, would enjoy later. But I'm friends with the cast now, and Larissa is a friend of mine, and I'm friends with the cast, and yeah, you might get to meet her someday. And I talked to the showrunner about. I did talk to the showrunner of Alex Mack about, I've talked to him recently, like, these are the issues that disabled people like me face. And he's like, yeah, like, if I had you on like one of my shows, like, you could zoom in, no problem. Like, it's not an issue until someone makes it an issue.
Absolutely.
Like.
Well, yeah, I mean, I when I was younger, I identified with Kelly Kapowski, with,
Right.
Brenda Walsh. I didn't, and then people would see something like Mac and me with the little boy in the wheelchair, and they go, look. And I'm like, look at what? That's a little boy. This has nothing to do with me. You think that I'm more that little boy than Kelly Kapowski just because I'm in a, it was like,
and I saw also like these, it was the show that came on after Buffy, True Calling, was a really empowering show for me. It came on in the early 2000s, and it was Eliza Dushku and Jason Priestley, and it was about a woman who worked in a morgue, and the dead bodies would ask her to help them, and her day would rewind like a Groundhog Day meets Run Lola Run. It was really good. It was so good, and like that was such an influence for me, for making me want to be the writer that I am today. Like, I actually got to tell Jason, like, when I met him for like 5 minutes, and I got to tell him he was signing something for me. And I told him, I was like, by the way, True Calling inspired my master's thesis. And he looks up at me and he goes, really? And I was like, yeah, thank you. And so, like, I just remember, and it had nothing to do with disability. It had nothing to do with disability, but to see a strong female character like that was really powerful. And I was like, well, I don't see disabled characters in that sense, but I see how I could put them in there. So I started writing fan fiction, etc. But you see yourself in parts of characters that might not be disabled, but you see yourself in them anyway, because there is something about them that you connect with. Like, you connected with in 90210 and other things. Like, there's something about those characters that resonates with us, but it's not quite enough. So we have to do the work ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and thank you. We're all done. I mean, that one's done. Can you believe it? So I want to know, because you're always, I just really quickly before we go, you mentioned rejection earlier, and I just want to talk about that because it's such an important part of anybody's journey, I think. And I think people are so afraid of rejection, but I think it's valuable. I mean, talk about it.
I don't mind talking about this at all. So people probably don't realize this, even the people who know me. When I finished my master's in 2015, and I started my PhD, around that time, I went back to back, and I stopped writing. I didn't stop writing. I was writing fiction still, but I stopped writing scripts for about 5 years, because I was like, I wasn't feeling it. I was like, I don't want to submit this script and then it get rejected. Like, there was something about it that didn't feel right. So I started writing scripts again, I think in 2019-ish. I wrote one script that gave me major mental health problems. We don't talk about that one. It's shelved. Then I wrote another one that I, revised and have been submitting, and that's been rejected a lot. but it also placed in a contest recently. So I think that it's not so much, you just have to get your work has to end up in, whether you're writing a book or a poem or a short story or a script or you're auditioning, the right person has to see your work and somehow identify with it, because it might not necessarily be your work. It could just be, I mean, you're going to get a lot of, oh, I just didn't connect with this because the person didn't connect with it. It's not necessarily like, I always think, oh, that makes me a bad, writer, or they don't want disabled characters, or they don't. And some of that might be true with, like, when people ask for diversity and stuff, but it's just the fact that people, not everyone will connect with everything. And it's everyone tells me, like, it's about getting that one yes amidst all the no's. And it gets really hard. Before I got a couple of these contest placements, I was getting really down on myself. I was getting really sad. I've been rejected from every TV writing fellowship I applied for. And then I just got a $200 grant the other day for my novel. So, like, it's up and down. Like, but you can't, like, I also learned, like, you can't stop submitting because you're going to get rejected anyway. You have to find the right home or the right place for your work, or whatever that looks like, and you'll know, like, especially us as disabled people, we have pretty good intuition. So
Yeah. Well, every no brings you closer to a yes,
Yeah, exactly. So, but I feel like that was important to bring up, because I don't want people to think, like, when I post, like, oh, she gets everything she applies for, like, oh no, God.
Why do people with disabilities, we have more intuition? Because I feel intuitive, but I didn't connect that to my disability. Why do you think that?
That's a good question. I think because we were talking earlier about, like, adapting and stuff. So I think we have, like, this nature that's like, oh, I know that I'm gonna have to think differently about this anyway. And, like, I have to plan my day in a certain way, like how you have all these things going on in your day today. Like, you have to do certain things in your day, and it just kind of intuitively, you just kind of know, you kind of learn as you grow older, right? Like, what's best for you, and, like, what works and what doesn't. And you try one thing, it works, you try something else, it doesn't work. And you get people to stop telling you to do yoga.
And then you sharpen your intuition by sort of trial and error.
Yeah. Oh yeah, trial and error. And you're like, I mean, I feel like it's a numbers game, like anything, right? You put your stuff out there, you say, okay, I've made my work the best I can make it, and you put it out there. Yeah. It's not going to connect with everyone, but you're going to get something at some point. So you just got to trust that it'll happen.
You got to be in it to win it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this was really, really great. I mean, thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad we finally got to do this together. Where can people find you and follow along with your stories like I do?
I keep it locked, but I could add people. I have a Twitter and an Instagram. It's at True Cherry Girl. It's TRU Cherry Girl. Twitter and Instagram. I don't have Facebook anymore. I do have a blog, but I don't update it. It's called Fangirl Life on Wheels. I do update, like, what I'm writing, but I don't like post there as much anymore. Okay. But I don't have a website yet. I'm sorry. I would be like, go to my website, but I don't have one yet.
They can send you a message on Instagram, and you'll.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a short story in Disabled Voices anthology. If anyone wants to check that out, it's my publication. It's called Night Terrors. If people like reading fiction, it's all work by disabled writers and authors and artists. It's very cool. And I have some more work coming out hopefully this year. So yeah, just send me a message. Be like, I saw you on Santina's show, and I should see it.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to see what else comes out of your brain through your.
You too, honestly. Like, you're so funny. Like, your reels and stuff. It cracks me up, and it just makes me laugh. And like, I need that belly laugh sometimes. Like we're all cooped up, and I just need that.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I try to have fun amidst the stress and the chaos and the anxiety and like you, not every day is a win. I know social media can make it look like that, but
yeah,
for anybody,
not at all. Like,
no.
Make no mistake.
Right, that's right. Well, stay safe, and we'll see you hopefully around Los Angeles soon. We'll be calling you Dr. Ameen in the near future.